What up, my fellow Survivor lovers? Welcome to the Survivor Historian Podcast, part of the Challenge Historian Podcast feed. I am your host and born-again Survivor superfan, Jacob Hollaball, and with me as he is almost every week, and when he's not here, it's usually because it's my fault, not his, that we're not here, but he is here today, the great and powerful Tony Lance. Tony, how are you doing? Coming down with COVID, fighting through, making sure we don't miss early on. How are we feeling?
I am on the mend. It was definitely touch and go. I can guarantee that for me at least, round 2 was not as swift as round 1. It's very drawn out, but I put on my massive oversized hoodie that was super comfy and watched Survivor this week and drank some orange juice rather than the usual red wine and got it done. And Malcolm and Aubrey watched the second viewing with me for notes today.
Love it. And speaking of Malcolm, it had to give a little pick me up that one of your favorite players of all time, that one of your children is named after, it got a legitimate reference in this episode. So that had to be a nice little pick me up.
Not only that, but when it was happening, when they were having that conversation and we were talking amongst ourselves, I was like, well, it worked for Malcolm and Denise. And then no less than like 5 seconds later, Malcolm and Denise show up on the screen. And I was like, yes,
that's amazing.
Vindication.
Yeah. Well, we will, of course, talk about that new little dynamic duo that is at play and everything else from episode 2 of Survivor 46. No real programming reminders otherwise, except for, I guess, for those that listen to both my challenge content as well as Survivor content. I will say, apologies. Last time I did a challenge related podcast, I thought that All Stars started on March 10th and it starts on April 10th. So I was all flustered, like, I got to get you a preview this weekend. They only gave us like 10 days from the trailer to the premiere. And I was clearly wrong. And haven't had a chance to talk on the podcast really since realizing how wrong I was. It would be nice if All Stars 4 came out in 2 days instead of a month, but we'll take it whenever we get it. So no program reminders other than we've got Survivor coverage coming to you every week that we're able to. We will, in all likelihood, maybe miss a week here or there, but we're going to do our best to come to you sometime between Thursday and Tuesday after the episode has aired is when we will record and get it out to you, more than likely, typically over the weekend. Is there anything with the challenge being on a break, anything going down at Challenge Fandom? I know you had the awesome interview with Kyland recently. Is that one already out? Right?
Not out yet. The next one in the hopper is Zara. So
wow.
Yeah.
Zara, Kyland back to back. That's gonna okay. We got good things coming.
Other than that, we're kind of taking like a much deserved break before whatever happens next. I mean, I know that next is All Stars 4, but I fully anticipate that like 40 is going to come right on the back of that, or like a USA 3 or something else. I don't feel that we're going to get this kind of break again anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, you will get a little bit of a break. They leave this weekend,
right,
to film 40. So we'll, those that are in the spoiler community will be filling us in on who leaves and who actually goes. And so if they've still got to film it and it's 2 to 3 months filming,
true.
I think they'll probably end up being a month at least break between All Stars 4, but that's challenge talk. That's not for here. So if you are a challenge fan though, of course, obviously I hope you've already subscribed to this podcast and Challenge Fandom and look forward to those wonderful interviews coming on Challenge Fandom in the very near future. Agenda for this evening. We're going to run through the episode and main storylines and all the different talking points and opinions as we always do. And then we'll hand out some awards and we will make some predictions at the end. We're still not going to quite debut the power rankings. 2 episodes in, only 2 people have left. There's a lot of people left. We will get to the power rankings at some point, but we do have some fun prediction questions and a listener submitted question or 2, and I will not forget about them this week. How dare I? Last week almost ended the show without them, and they were such good ones too. So if you have any questions or anything, hit Tony up, hit myself up, and let us know. We're happy, thrilled, in fact, to answer questions from you, the loyal listeners who we love and appreciate so much. All right, let's kick things off with we're still going to do tribe by tribe
Sure.
for the walk through the episode versus, because again, they do, they obviously are going back and forth so much that would get pretty confusing for us to try to talk about. We're going to go one tribe at a time, then we'll hit the immunity challenge, and then we will hit the scramble and tribal council with our favorite tribe, Yanu, because obviously Yanu takes center stage again. And before we even get into the episode, really quick, the one thing I want to ask you right up top, Tony, we do now have, this is the third season in a row that we have one of the three tribes is a pretty big mess. There's a lot of different words you could use, but I think mess is probably the most just easy to use, and kind, but also appropriate. And I thought the best thing I saw, I don't know how much you're out on the internet streets after the episodes and the social media streets and whatnot, but I thought the funniest thing, while also making me think how great would this be, was the great Tyson Apostle tweeted out, and I that season 50 of the show should be Yanu versus Lulu versus Tika. And I'd bring all the original of those three tribes back. And I was like, that's a hilarious joke, but also that would kind of be fascinating to watch. What do you think of that? And what do you think of the fact that we, for the third season in a row, kind of do have one of the three tribes that's just like a complete mess?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because those three tribes are all very different too. It's not like there's a certain archetype that you're seeing again and again and again. It's just a weird dynamic that this, like, the same people just don't quite mesh the same way as they do in the other two tribes. I think that Yanu may have gone in thinking that they had an easier road because physically they look like a much more dominant tribe. And I really think that it bit them in the butt. And I think that they're still trying to recover that from like a confidence standpoint and communication, because I think that more so than anything else, communication is the weakest link on that tribe.
Mm-hmm. I think that's spot on. And that maybe defines all three of those tribes are individually good communicators, maybe one-on-one, a lot of situations, good communication, but as a group, just really bad. And the only other thing I can really think that they kind of have in common is, I know no one, wanted to quit on Yanu or on Tika. And obviously multiple people did quit on Lulu last season, but there was like the clear outcast day one that then leads to like the clear kind of leader of the group has the option of like, well, there is the, like, yes, everyone's totally out on this person in this episode, it's Jess, but if I'm like the leader and there's a clear person out, you could go the route of like what Caleb did last season and was like, the best thing for me actually is to like rope that person in. Who would be a better ride or die with me than the person who thinks there's no chance, and the person they think is leading the argument against them comes and says, actually, there is a chance, we should work together, and like that building up. So having that person that's immediately outcast kind of creates that dynamic where like, this seems like it should be easy, but it gives the person kind of in power every option. And when they can't communicate, it just turns to a mess. So
Oh yeah.
it was a funny, I hadn't even like realized though that it was the third season in a row till I saw a bunch of people repost that tweet from him, and it was like, Jesus, it really is. And I don't know, maybe the casting folks love it. Again, like you said, there isn't like, it's not like, oh, we always put this type of person and this type of person together and it brings down the tribe and we did it again, guys, hilarious. It's like, no, like they're not, I doubt they're like trying for this to happen. But I would bet there's at least a conversation going on of like, are we not doing a very good job of making these tribes even? Like, do we need to rethink how we group people? Like, all that behind the scenes.
It's so weird too, because if you think back, like just to 41, they had talked about, I forget who, but somebody got COVID right before they were supposed to film. Jenga feels very strongly about it as well. I've got Jenga behind me and Mozzie in front of me, and like it could go one of two ways. Jenga left, so that's, I guess, a third way. But yeah, like because somebody got COVID and couldn't come, then that reshuffled the entire tribes because they had this archetype and they didn't want this person to be blah, blah, blah. So like they clearly have a plan in place, but at the same time, we've consistently got that one tribe that's like, I won't say a hot mess, but like if everybody has the same ingredients to make a cake and one person doesn't sift their flour, that cake's not going to be as good.
Yeah, certainly. And it goes to something we referenced last week when I like kind of pointed out I hadn't totally thought before. We talked last week about how Nami, like the advantage of getting all the supplies immediately,
Yeah.
really like has all these extra compounding advantages to it. And Yanu is similar, similar to Lulu and Tika before them. They've got no shelter, they've got no fire, and that is the main reason, as we learned, that's like really driving this team down, is like their shelter fell on them in the middle of the night. I think that we saw that in last week's episode.
Yep.
We learned after the fact from an interview Jess did. She gave like the shout out to Jelensky of like, if Jelensky wouldn't have tried to go look for an idol in the middle of the night, we wouldn't have got up, and that thing would have like maybe not, I don't think it would have killed them, but it probably would have messed them up pretty good or whatever. So she was like, shout out Jelensky for saving our lives or whatever, which I found funny. But that's the main, I think, reason why they're in shambles, and maybe is the other connective tissue between those past tribes of like, when you lose the first two and suddenly the other two tribes both have full equipment and fire, and you have none of it, and it's day 4, and like you're dropping energy level much, much quicker than the others that are at least getting coconuts, maybe sleeping a few hours, staying warm if it rains, things of that nature. Like it just compounds so much. So they're in shambles, and Jess is eating ants so that she doesn't have to talk, which is
I don't blame her
strategy.
And that's like in that
I don't
tribe
blame her eating them.
No. And the other thing too, right, is the other tribes, they've won stuff, right? So they're able to sit and relax for a minute. And that's where you get like the song off that I know we're going to get to later, and the conversations like at Nami, where they're getting to know each other a lot better because they have this downtime. Whereas Yanu is 100%, how do we win? How do we not lose? And everything is just amped up to like 11, where at the same time, they don't have any of the necessities that everyone else does to even get close to it.
Yeah. When morale's, you need something to keep morale up around camp and create some of the more positive moments, or just keep you in a slightly better mood than you're going to be from starving and living outside and everything else. And they definitely have none of it. The only one though that does seem to have a little of it, and that I want to ask you about, is Kenzie, who basically Yanu has 2 storylines this whole episode. One is that they're kind of a mess, and they're clearly struggling with the lack of supplies and everything else. But the second one is amongst this, like, Jess is on the outs, Banu slowly becomes on the outs, but Kenzie also takes focus throughout the pre-challenge part of, she goes off and has the conversation with Jess and Banu of like, should we maybe team up, which she, from what we see, gets kind of very little answer back from either of them of interest. But everyone starts to look at her and realize like, wow, you have a solid thing over there, and the 2 of us that are still on the outs realize the 3 of you have a solid thing. Yeah, you're the only one of those 3 that's still coming to us, and like, maybe I should have a solid thing with everyone. And everyone's kind of seeing her for the social threat that she portends to be in the merge, which they're thinking about pretty early here. And perfectly, we'll talk maybe more about it when we get to Tribal Council a lot. What do you think though of Kenzie? Is she going a little too hard, too quickly, raising her threat level too quickly? Or is this just, they kind of needed a storyline for this tribe other than things aren't going well, and so let's focus on this?
Yeah, so in Jess's exit interview with Rob on Rob Has a Podcast, she had said that when Kenzie took them over there, because the other 3 are perceived as such a tight 3, she thought that Kenzie was bringing them over just so that Q and Tiffany could work on something. So it wasn't even necessarily that she even bought into it to begin with. And the same with, I believe, in like episode 1, where she said that she's playing a slow game when Kenzie came to talk game with her. It was because Kenzie had gone to everyone else to talk game and not her, and then came to talk to her. So I think that Kenzie is smart in having at least a surface level conversation with everyone. I think that she may not have realized how close Jess and Q were, because she had also said, I want to say it was in Dalton Ross's interview, that none of the conversations that she had with Q were really in the episodes, but that she had spoken to Q. And I think Q had mentioned that he was Banu's number one. He was also Jess's number one. So really quickly, if nothing else was accomplished this episode from viewer's standpoint, it's very clear to see the entire hierarchy of the Yanu camp from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's everyone has kind of a different order in their own mind to some degree, but the top three are the same but shuffled, and Banu and Jess at the bottom are shuffled in people's minds, but I think it's otherwise pretty up in the air. Well, we'll talk a lot about them by the end of the episode here, so let's move to Nami here. Nami on day 4. I actually basically want to talk about everyone from this tribe quickly, because everyone has something worth talking about. Let's start with the one who probably gets the least airtime, but was one of the biggest. We're going to talk about 2 changes here. Not changes in opinion. 2 opinions, one that changed completely and one that somehow got more dramatic. The first one that changed completely was Randon, who last week, all we got from him was like, oh, so the middle-aged guy immediately was like, attractive young woman, no, that's the threat, get
Trouble.
out of here. At least had the respect to like call her Parvati Light and like make it like, there's a reason behind this other than just like pretty young woman, no, not doing it. And everyone was like, okay, maybe this guy isn't super great or whatever. And then this episode I was like, dude, he's super likable. He's like he's kind of like the chill medium of his tribe, which is maybe me being the very even keel middle of the road emotional person that I am. Maybe is just like, oh, thank goodness, we need one of you on that tribe. I found him just way more likable and way more thoughtful about how he's going about the game this episode. There's the first one, while again knowing that it was basically like 1 3-ish minute scene that we got each time with him. Did you have any similar thoughts on Randon?
Yeah, total 180 on Randon. Like there wasn't much to go on last week, but basically he ended up vilifying the person that he ended up aligning with. So by calling her Parvati Light and by having those conversations about not to be trusted, he then kind of made a harder road forward for himself, because he's now sort of aligned with her as well. But now they're 2 on the bottom, because he's already said, don't trust this person, but also you should trust this person because now I'm working with her. I liked him a lot. I really like the fact that he is much more of a gamer than I thought he was as well. He's much more tuned into the game. I kind of felt that he was just sort of there before, because every once in a while you get a person who likes the game, figures they'll try it, end up getting on as through casting, but he actually like knows how to play. Was not anticipating it. Very happy.
Yeah, he's definitely not just chilling. He's kind of in comparison to like what we see with Jess, who is like, I want to play a slow game, but I'm also not necessarily like taking in all of the info, or at least having trouble taking in all the info or anything. He's playing the slower, quiet game, but he is very much diligently taking in everything and monitoring everything. And yeah, I think it's great that it could work against him, like you said, that like, shit, I told everyone else that like we shouldn't trust this girl, and now she's like the one person I got here. But it could help if there is a point in the future where they get a third person on their side, and like they gotta pull the wool over someone's eyes, and it's easy for him and Venus to act like we don't, like, no, we're not working together at all, like I told you from day one, like that's the threat or whatever. So there could be an advantage there if they can get kind of the steps before that comes into play.
I think it needs to be Liz. That's because
the
other 3, I don't see the other 3 deviating from that trio, and they're not like a fully solidified trio. It just seems like that Tevin's close with Hunter, Tevin's close with Soda, and therefore the 3 of them will fall in line. So really it only leaves Liz to work with. And I feel like it'll be easier to get her because Tevin doesn't seem to want to work with her. She's first one gone, seems to be in his mind. So, which understandable. yet
What do you
again.
mean understandable? She's the greatest. I don't know if you've heard, Tony, but what do you mean that she's the first
I didn't
god?
hear it the first time. So when I rewatched it, it was when I fully heard the why she doesn't need a partner because she makes so much more money than they do and therefore doesn't need somebody for support. I didn't catch that at all the first time. I caught the everyone wants to be with Liz bit, and I was like, okay, it feels like she's sort of playing up. You know how some people are confident and then there's some people that are not confident, so they say things that are like way outside the realm of whatever so that it comes off level. That's what I thought she was going for until I listened again, and she said once again that she's mega rich.
Yeah. So to run through the full quotes of some things she said. So the first one is, quote, I cannot imagine the person that would marry Liz. Also, she exclusively talks in the third person. We have not heard her speak without referring to herself during each sentence in third person. And so I don't know if this was it could be a thing like I'm going to do this once and on Survivor. And then suddenly like in your depleted state, you're like, why am I doing this over? Why is this like a thing now or whatever? I don't know. But she said, I cannot imagine the person that would marry Liz. I don't mean this in any type of way, but there's a special type of man who can deal with someone making so much money and actually not needing them, end quote, which is one of those things. And I want to preface this obviously with I'm the man talking about this. So like but there's only the two of us guys on this show. So if we're going to talk about it, it has to come from my perspective, trying to imagine her perspective. I get what she's trying to say. And if someone else said it, I would take it in like a very real, like, had some experiences with like some, really toxic masculine type of guy or whatever. That's like, no. Like I'm insecure. If you make money, have your career, put your career first, any of that type of stuff, I totally get, but her version of it falls a little flat where I'm like, I think there are plenty of those people out there. I'll also say this as the one experience I have. I'm one of these people, Liz. I'm not going to say I have a Liz for a wife, but I have a very successful wife that it's amazing. And I'm perfectly comfortable with it, but also understand that, yeah, there's some people out there that wouldn't be. But I think, Liz, you might want to introspect a little bit because I think the equation might not just be this side is out of whack. I think the internal side might be off. But yes, then she also says money would better my life. It wouldn't change my life. And then everybody wants to be with Liz, but can they? So what she ends on, which I actually just thought was amazing. And Randon kind of says some similar to what you said, but in just the most incredible way. He compares Liz to, I think he's talking to maybe Soda about it.
Yeah.
And says like, yeah, it's like talking to a billboard. It's just an ad for the person. And I was like, that is a brilliant analogy of what we have seen so far from Liz, and clearly maybe what they have too, of like, every time she speaks, it's kind of just, you're not talking to me. I'm just going to tell you that I'm really great, and kind of like you're literally an ad for the person behind the ad. And I thought that was really brilliant.
It was. And I feel like what Randon said solidified what I had thought, which was that Liz reminds me of Emily without a Caleb, where to have that conversation and be like, look, nothing wrong with who you are or what you're doing. There is a different way that you can go about this, a different way to say the exact same thing. But so far, I think we have independently heard almost everyone on her tribe say, like, point out the fact that she makes more than enough money, which I listened to a podcast that Kyland did. I want to say it was Maria Menounos' podcast, Heel Squad. Yeah. He had said that in a game like in a game like this, like Big Brother, like the challenge, you're doing anything that you can to find a reason to villainize everyone else in order to rationalize voting somebody out. And in a game like this, with life-changing money on the line, if somebody is saying that they already have money, that they are already well off, and I know that she said it was in a confessional, it wasn't with the rest of the group, where she said that the money would be nice, but it was not life-changing money for her. There are 5 other people that it potentially is life-changing money for them on her tribe. So I can see that being the reason. Nothing more, nothing against her personally, nothing more than she doesn't need the money. And that's happened like time and time again.
Yeah, and it's a great call out because it was a great point by Kyland of like, and many have made it from being inside of these shows of like, the fans can't get upset. Like you're playing the game, you're grasping at anything, and that's what makes it interesting and leads to lots of the drama. But yeah, on a tribe of 6 people, if everyone, the first kind of thing they know about you, which we saw her first comment to them when they were in the water last episode was, I've got a bunch of businesses, I've sold some, and so I'm doing real good. And so they're like, okay, well, I have one piece of info so far from everyone, and your piece of info makes me not feel bad if you don't win the money. And so, okay, great. First straw I can grasp at is towards her. So she's got an uphill battle to climb, certainly. But then the rest of this tribe is a very interesting dynamic between Tevin and Soda, and Hunter, but Hunter's a little, I think, will take center stage. We saw on the next week on maybe in this brewing kind of battle here. But for this episode, it's kind of Tevin and Soda versus Venus, where next episode looks like Hunter gets much more in that on the Tevin Soda side versus Venus, but they're not necessarily listening to her as much around camp or interacting with her as much. And then we can talk about the challenge portion or the aftermath of challenge, because Nami is the only tribe we see other post challenge other than Yanu, and where we quickly see that they go back and Venus is upset that I'm trying to like help lead us in the challenge. Everyone doesn't listen to me, and not listening to me results in running over my foot with this heavy ass thing and maybe injuring me. And then she doesn't say it to them, but we get the little flashback and the whole like, I've gotten the idol from Jeff, and so took it from me last time immediately twice. And tried to this time, twice. The first, I guess, the third time.
No, like last week and this week, yeah.
Yeah, and so we get that little moment. So there's a bunch of tension between them, and that's kind of the brew. While this team wins, it has 3 for 3, first place 3 times. If and when they don't get first or second, we clearly see the lines have been drawn of Tevin and Soda over here, very much dominating personalities that are dominating this tribe right now, and Venus as the one over here that's at least clearly showing her discomfort and or an opposition to Tevin and Soda.
Yeah, and I was very incorrect last week when I said that there were no personality issues in Nami as far as them being a united front. When I went back to just make sure who I had picked as my winner pick, and as soon as the episode started, that's basically my opening comment. And then we got this episode where that was very much not the case. So I am 2 for 2 in having a bad read on something per episode. So at least I'm consistent.
Yeah, of course. And I do think I'm rooting for them to not lose either.
Yes.
Which sometimes at this point, you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready for this team to lose because I want to see what happens with this.
Yeah.
I think as it currently stands, we kind of where the numbers would be where the numbers are. So I'm almost kind of right now, until it gets a little more even in there, or there's more time for Liz, Randon, and Venus to kind of decide it's 3 versus 3. I almost want them to like be the tribe that wins never goes to tribal before the merge or something, and they go into the merge like, there's 6 of us, but we all hate each other. If you give us long enough, we're gonna all hate each other. There's gonna be nothing left here, and it'll be a big explosion in the merge. But
and you can tell me if I'm way off base in this read, but it almost seemed like the edit we were getting was, here are all the people that are on the bottom of their respective tribes. Here's the people that are trying to make connections with these other people. I feel like they're building that up to do some sort of a swap or a merge or something much sooner than we're used to, because it was they very much focused on it. And where they've only got 2 2-hour episodes this season, it initially seemed sort of weird that we had such a talky episode to be a 2-hour episode. The premiere, understandable. You got to meet these people. But this episode, it was 2 hours. It didn't feel long, but there was a lot of conversation. So I feel like that's got to be for a reason, because they're always intentional with their timing.
Yeah, and a 2-hour episode that only featured one challenge too, which
Yeah.
I don't know how many times. Premiere episodes. Yes, I think that happens every time they do a 2-hour premiere. But any non-premiere episode, if it's 2 hours long and it isn't, we're fitting in a reward and an immunity split up,
Yeah.
is a lot of time talking. And I think if anything, it maybe just alludes to like, hopefully that means that there's just a lot of storylines that they've got to like make sure they fill us in on, or
Totally.
maybe have heard a little bit of feedback of some of the modern seasons are like, hey, we kind of sometimes will get 2/3 into this, and in the final 7, 1 or 2 people that like really end up mattering, not maybe winning, but like really mattering, we
Yeah.
kind of don't have any idea, or they kind of seem to like come up with something out of nowhere where maybe there was more you could have showed us to get us to that point. And so maybe they're just trying to really like, the season we want to lay the groundwork as best we possibly can of everyone's motivations, everyone's things, and maybe it means a lot more people than you'll get to emerge and be like, okay, we kind of know the 4 or 5 people that they might not be the last 5 standing, but that are kind of like running the storyline of this show, versus maybe the season setting up to be like, no, like everyone's kind of got something going on that like is a real strand and storyline to pull. But yeah, that's Nami. They will definitely have plenty of story to tell in the future ones. The final tribe then is Siga, and a couple things to talk about with Siga. Well, there's 2 people we won't talk about. Well, I'll ask my fun question about the 2 people that we've still yet to meet in your favorite Mariah and one of my favorites, Jem, who we both like, even though they're not. Did they even speak this episode? Mariah on the sit-out bench.
Yeah, Mariah on the sit-out bench. They both had confessionals about the song off, but
yes, that's it. I think that's it.
I think that's it.
So those 2. If anyone has an issue with the editing so far, 2 episodes in, they might be like, "Hey, it'd be cool if I was on Survivor," because like I'm on Survivor. I thought, especially in Jem's case, I'm just like, dude, I barely, when I saw the opening credits, which I'm glad they're doing again, second season in a row, they brought back, and I was like, oh yeah, I said she was one of my favorites, even though we didn't meet her last week. And then at the end of this episode, I was like, I still don't think we met her at all. But anyways, because we didn't meet them, their confessionals did come during Ben and Charlie's versus battle, which was probably one of the biggest moments of the episode. And
yes, it was.
My goodness. Well timed on Charlie's part and Survivor's part of we're in year 2 of, not that Taylor Swift hasn't been dominating the world for a lot longer, but true global dominance, year 2 of Taylor Swift here. We get Charlie, who says, he's kind of has some social anxieties, kind of having a little bit of a difficult time connecting with everyone when they're not talking game. He knows it's important to be like, the game talk's cool, but like I need these people to also just like me outside of thinking I have good ideas of who to vote out and everything. And so his main in is, he's like, I'm a big Swiftie, I love Taylor Swift, and Ben is a musician and clearly likes talking about music, so like, let's talk to Ben about music. He pitches a versus battle, which for those who weren't on Instagram circa the pandemic 2020, they went into 2021, they died out fairly quickly, much quicker than the pandemic did, unfortunately. But a versus battle, the real version, for those who don't know, is 2 artists would get together and live stream it on Instagram or YouTube, and would literally it would be like Ludacris and T.I. are gonna back and forth play one of their songs until one of them just decides, I don't want to, none of the rest of my songs are worth playing, or I run out of songs, and we all just listen to the 2 artists' music for a while, and no one really wins. But they do a version where they just name songs.
Yeah.
And I was pretty blown away that Ben did. I wasn't blown away by Charlie's part. I was blown away by Ben's part.
Yeah.
What, 100, I think the final tally was 107 to 106, something.
106 to 108, because Charlie snuck one in at the very end as part of his handshake,
which was clever. Yeah. Which was clever. What would you have been feeling if you were one of the other 4 people sitting around the tribe watching this experience?
I would be amazed that anybody can remember that many song titles, because even as like I thought about it, the closest I can get is probably Weird Al. That is probably the artist that I can name the most titles.
Canada's finest.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. Like, I would be shocked. I would think, what else do they know if they know this much about this thing? Also, there is absolutely nothing else to do on the island at that point in the game. So it's got to be entertaining. I mean, I think Mariah said it in her confessional of just like, we've reached a point where we're just watching two guys say things back and forth to each other and we're entertained.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's peak boredom. You got nothing. I guess their shelter is kind of half built. They got a fire now. I think we saw maybe early in the episode they got their first. Yeah, we did, because Ben.
Yeah,
we got kind of the Ben backstory after he got the fire started and got emotional about that. The only thing I will say is it wasn't in the spirit of a true versus battle, because the true versus battle is only supposed to be like, I'm only allowed to play the hits, and the only rule I remember being was like the artists were allowed to call each other. I'm like, no, like that doesn't count. That wasn't a big enough hit. This is like who has more hits type of contest. So when they started, I was like, sorry Ben, but Metallica didn't put out nearly as much music, or just wouldn't have as many hits, not because better or worse, but just because Taylor Swift has had a million songs on the radio that you could say are hits. But then they're just like, no, how many songs can you name? I have one or two artists, my absolute favorite artists, that I could name every one of their songs, but like Kip Moore is my favorite artist, and he has 6 albums, so that's of like 13 14 songs each, so what, that's like 80. And then he has like 8 or 10 off a couple EPs. Like, he maybe has 100 songs released as a guy who's been making music for like 15 years. And so, yeah, the fact that they picked artists that had enough songs and said that many, I don't know, it was pretty crazy and wild. They need to put out the unedited version on YouTube or something. I want to know how long it took, how fast paced this was, and just for their own view counts and everything. Like Survivor people, CBS people, just, it's Taylor Swift content. Lots of views come your way with Taylor Swift content these days. But the main thing with Charlie, after this happens, he's kind of ingratiated himself, and we've still got the dynamic in Siga of the women feeling good, Tim feeling like the men need to be tight, because the women, unbeknownst to him, the women actually are. So he gets that like credit, even though I don't think he actually knows. I think we, the viewer, know. But it ends up being Charlie and Maria chatting. And what we alluded to in the intro, them going to, the analogies they get to make, but realizing, hey, the women are over here and we've invited Charlie in, but the two men saw that and Charlie's a part of that. And the two of us can be in the middle and actually like run this. So assuming you like it, given the references made to others who have done this before, but how are we feeling about Charlie and Maria's ability to not only enter into this, but to maybe pull off like running their tribe from the middle?
It's the smartest alliance there if you look at any combination of two, because not only that, but it then forces the other groups of two to be an alliance, whether they want to or not, because you're not kind of breaking that up. They also come from different, like, you wouldn't immediately assume that Charlie and Maria are the two that are going to match and form an alliance. So it makes total sense to me. Not just because it's a Malcolm and Denise situation.
What season were they on again?
25.
25. Okay.
Yeah.
Which was,
and it's actually the one that it's the one that we're rewatching right now too. So it's very timely. But yeah, they are a great alliance for the same reason. Like, you don't necessarily look at those two people and think these are the people that are going to be ride or dies. And that's kind of what you need in Survivor, because you can team up with people that are exactly like you, but people are going to spot you a mile away. So it's sort of covert, and it does position them where the girls and Charlie are 4, the guys are 3, and they were all actively talking about bringing Maria in. So it's perfect in kind of any way that you slice it. So I'm really looking forward to see how it works going forward, because I could really see the two of them going deep in the game together, especially if they make the merge. They would be able to kind of navigate that pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Charlie needs to fill Maria in quickly though about Tim is scared of the women getting together, because they are in that perfect position now where it's like, okay, we're gonna end up with 2 4-person alliances that were the 2 people that are in both of them, and basically have these 3 groups of 2. We're the connective tissue. We need to keep those other 2 groups from realizing we're the connective tissue and talking. And the number one way to do that is just like Charlie be like, all right, Maria, you're gonna come in and you're gonna tell Tim immediately, like, hey, the women are like trying to get together, and I just don't know if I could trust it, whatever. Like, just drop one line about the women getting together to Tim, and we're golden. We're so golden, and they'll be sitting pretty. So that's going down on Siga. Let's move to the immunity challenge then, and the opening and the ending of the immunity challenge. The challenge itself was like a pretty close contest and interesting and had things that happen, but really before they played and after they played were kind of the most interesting things. And before they played, they just had a straight up roast of Jelensky, and I don't feel like, I mean, I know he did the several 7 thing in front of everyone, so they all knew that and obviously made a bunch of jokes about it. Is this put your historian cap on for me? Does this happen on Survivor very often, that the tribes like see who got voted out and make fun of the person who got voted? I couldn't believe this.
Now, whether it's just not in the show and it happens, not entirely sure. I mean, like, there might have been some playful banter in 40 when it was all the winners back, or even like heroes versus villains. I don't recall specific situations, but those are the ones where I can see, like, when the heroes are getting decimated, you know that the villains are, like, drinking that up. But other than that, the only thing that I can think of that really stands out is when the tribe didn't even go to tribal council when they lost, just unanimously sent Brandon Hance home because they didn't want to go back to camp with him. And, like, that's the first time I've ever seen anybody be voted out of the show at a challenge.
When was this again?
That would have been 26.
Okay.
So right after Philippines. Yeah, they just didn't want to go back to camp with him. And they were just like, we don't want to go back to camp. We don't have to vote. Like, he's going home. So then, of course, there's that like sense of relief the next time when the tribe saw him. But yeah, I've never seen a tribe come in and then the person who's not even there to defend himself be immediately made fun of, and like valiantly so. Some of them are my lines of the night, especially because they come from the most unassuming people. Because it was Tim, who we've only heard talk about female alliances, spout off legendary to get it all started, and then Hunter, who's like super nice and like fairly quiet, who says last name first out because Jelensky wanted to go by his last name rather than David. And then Charlie, of all people, with, so were there several reasons for you guys voting him?
Yeah, I didn't even yeah, you're right. It came from like the 3 most unassuming guys that, yeah, not necessarily expected. It was very, very funny. It does lead to like, there's a further back and forth that then happens between Soda and Q, which I was pretty fascinated by.
Me too.
So there's like a little bit of a defense from Q, who gets like, okay, can we like, you're making fun of him, but you're making fun of our tribe as much as anything by proxy here. So like, let's not. And then Banu gives a speech about Gandhi, and being hungry for an idol. And it's yeah, it's a half decent pump up speech. And then to top it all off, Jeff, everyone I saw a lot online, and maybe it was also because like the main like Survivor accounts and stuff like put out some stuff about it too, which sometimes happens, of like maybe Jeff wants a very specific narrative. I don't know. But he, pulls the knife out and cuts the buff off the idol that Nami had put their little piece of the buff around the idol. And then afterwards they, ask, where's the buff, Jeff, for it back and stuff. I didn't really like think, I mean, it was like a cute moment from Jeff, but I didn't like really think much of it. And it seemed like they wanted people to maybe think a lot of it.
I think Jeff mentioned it on Fire. There were sort of 2 ways he could have handled it. When you look at it, he's like, Jenga, stop playing with stuff. I like the response. I don't know if it came through.
It did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jeff had said there's two ways that he could have taken it. It was funny. Like, he appreciated it. So he could have very easily said, you know what? You're the only tribe who's had this immunity idol. If somebody else wants to take this buff off of it, then win it. But he also understands the criticism that he's been too soft on some of the players and some of the tribes in the last couple of seasons, specifically the quits from last season. So he opted to cut off the buff and say, like, yeah, if you want this, you got to earn it, which I get. Like, I understand both of them. Like, I'm not losing sleep over either of them. If he would have done the other thing, I wouldn't have thought about him cutting it off. He cut it off. I didn't really think about him saying it's yours until it's somebody else's. I did appreciate, though, that when Q said, like, obviously your 6 is better than our 6, let's see if our 5 is better, or your 5 is better than our 5. Did you hear what Soda said to him after, like, the whole, if that's the way you want to do it, like, that's whatever, like, blah, blah, blah. Her last line to Q, which is what prompted the Gandhi line. When everything was quiet, Soda goes, "How's the food?" Which is when Venus hit her, and she was like, he started it. She asked them how the food was, the tribe who has not had any of their supplies or eaten.
Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, when you're a camp counselor, I bet I don't know if they reference what age the kids at the camp she's a counselor at are, but like you just hear those kids of most ages are just like talking shit all day long.
Oh,
in,
yeah.
like, the most funny ways. So it's definitely, I'm glad that it's in her a little bit. And it was a fun moment. And that is a dig though. Like if I'm Q, I remember that. Like, sorry, if we come into a merge, we're gonna have to talk about that immediately because that's just like it's not very cool.
I'm not taking you on a reward.
Yeah, like you're never gonna come on any food related reward, which is all of them. They all basically come with food.
Yep.
I wish Jess would have raised her hands and be like, actually, I've eaten a lot of ants. I don't know if you guys have tried them, but we've had a lot of them and they're good. So fuck you. That would
okay. So what's funny with that is Jess got a decent amount of shit from her tribe for it, but Banu did it like last week and nobody had an issue with it. He was like, "Yeah, we eat ants all the time," and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool."
I think their issue is when she said, because it's not in a confessional, it's like to them that she says like, if I eat enough, maybe I won't have to talk.
No, she said that was a confessional when she said like, if I'm basically just eating them so I don't have to say anything.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just they keep looking over and keep seeing her and like, are you gonna share
with the rest of us?
Are you really gonna go for a meal here or whatever? I don't know. But speaking of Jess, let's talk about the thing we potentially have some disagreement on from pre-show text, which we gotta always remember to cut ourselves off.
It's true.
End up gonna have to start sending each other the save it for the podcast text here. But Jess, surprise, surprise, Yanu loses. Although it's much closer this time, and all 3 tribes struggle pretty mightily with the puzzle, which we saw the arch puzzle last season, but individuals, right? And so like small blocks. Yeah. Have we seen the big version, the team version this before?
So they talked about it on Fire as well, like where normally they build a small scale first to see like the functionality of it and everything, but then they ended up actively using that last season when Drew won. But this is the first time that they've done it as a big one. They've talked for a while about doing a larger arch puzzle, but they've just not had the time to like test it and everything else. But this one they did, so it's the first time that they've done it as a tribe. It's really interesting. Like it looks way harder than I think it is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does, and I think it is. I think it's super hard. I mean, clearly based on the results, it is very difficult. But I think it isn't anything. These tribes weren't like bad at it or something. I think it is just factual that the evidence came out what it was, because it is very difficult. And
they had to give them a break during it. They had to give a commercial break to give everyone a breather before they came back to it. I don't think I've ever seen a commercial break in the middle of a challenge before, like that.
Really?
Not
Or
to that
maybe
effect. Like they came back in and did like slow-mo on everybody about like
yeah, the moment they came back was weird. I was like,
yeah.
this is different than Survivor, guys. This is like slow-mo
American Gladiator.
yeah, like music in the back. It was just it was a very abrupt change for 25 seconds or whatever. But um yeah, they all struggle. Obviously, Nami pulls it out, and then Siga is a little bit behind them, just narrowly beating Yanu, but after they both dropped dozens of times. And amongst all the drops for Yanu, uh, the one who bears the brunt of Banu's yelling and the rest of his the tribes generally most of their ire after the fact is Jess. And she, as we'll talk about the rest of this podcast now, is, we've read and listened to different interviews with her afterwards. She was in hell the whole time. She was not having a great experience out there. You rewatched the challenge and maybe felt that the yelling at her, the blaming of her was not necessarily valid, correct?
Yes. So I rewatched it and I because I spent basically my morning listening to On Fire and then reading the exit view interview with Dalton Ross and then the Rob Has a Podcast exit interview. It seemed like one of the things that she said that really stood out was obviously like if they went back to tribal, she didn't really have a chance once they lost, and once she was already like the second option last week, there wasn't a lot of traction to be gained. But from the exit stuff, one of the things that she had said was if they're already planning to get rid of her, it doesn't make any sense for them to make more enemies within the tribe of 4 that are going to be returning from tribal again. So everybody just sort of like, she was the scapegoat as far as everybody yelled at Jess for the things that were going wrong. Rewatching it, Q took a fairly long time to chop the rope. Like Hunter did it in 2. I think the person who was on the other tribe did it in like 3. Jem, there you go. Jem did it in 3, so there's another moment for Jem. And then I think Q did it in probably about like 7 or 8. But when they were running through it, Jess was either pushing at the back or she went through ahead and like cleared the way. Because she was moving in one of the aerial shots, she was moving the barrels out of the way so that they could come through. And even when they were stacking everything up, I'm not saying that she didn't drop anything, because obviously like everybody dropped stuff, but there seemed to be an equal amount of shots of like she was on one side of the puzzle and then Tiff and Kenzie dropped the other half of the puzzle and things like that, so that it wasn't consistently her messing up. And like Tiffany had an I up for persistence and she tried to switch it for a T, based on where they were in the actual word. But then the T fell and blah, blah, blah. So I don't think that she was the reason that they lost, but I think that they all decided that she was the reason they lost, because they had pretty much already decided going in that if they lost, it was Jess, that she was the contributing factor. Now, what I'm about to say, I do not necessarily agree with, but Tiffany said that the common denominator in them losing was basically Jess, right? So technically, the only person on that tribe that has been a part of every single loss is Q, because he was on the sweat portion and then in every single challenge that everyone else has been in. So if you want to get technical, the common denominator for failures on Yanu is actually Q. Well, I don't think that he's actually the reason that they lost any of their challenges.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Jelensky played quite a big factor in that first loss that
by
Q
throwing the hourglass.
Although I still, yeah, because Q couldn't have even tried to do it on his own once he threw the hourglass.
No,
and I think we didn't say that last week, but I do think there was a world where Q's at least like, feel free to leave. Like I'll do it.
I'll do it myself.
I asked you and you said you'd quit, and I thought about it. And I'll still try because I think that's going to look better. Yeah, I think that you're spot on, and Jess is spot on in reading the gamesmanship of, if we're gonna vote this person out anyways, and we're all super upset, then like why would we, maybe if the other person we kind of want to be upset with is Banu, because it seems like maybe he's the other one that, from a communication during it standpoint, was the one they would have been upset with or were, and but they like were trying to keep that in a little because, you know, going all the way through tribal council, that what the performance he puts on is maybe exactly what they're worried about, and you know, they're hoping to avoid as much of that as possible if they're determined it's going to be Jess anyways. I do think though, it also says the setup of the challenge is diabolical, because, and we saw, I think it was with Siga's tribe maybe, that like the people, the tallest people with the longest arms may are necessary to put in the last piece, because I think it was Siga that the first time they were down to like one piece left, and maybe it was Jem or Mariah was trying to put it in. Jem was trying to put it in. She's like, I'm not tall enough. Like, you have to get this over top and drop it down in, and I can no longer do it. And Nami like figured out like Hunter has to kind of be the one to put the last piece in. He's the only one that can get it high enough. But your natural instinct is what we saw all the three tribes do, of like, well, the tallest, longest arm person can hold the most pieces at the beginning, so you should go first and like hold until you can't hold anymore, and you hold 4 or 5 at the bottom or whatever. But then it turns into Jess is the last one, and it's like, Jess, put the last piece in, and she's like, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I can't get up there. That's not going to work. And so then she's just unfortunately also in that spot where they're like, well, unfair or not, and again, unfair, but they, you know, they want to blame her if they can. But it's like, there was one piece left and Jess was there and we didn't, and then we didn't do it. It's like, well, yeah, because, you know, look, take a step back and look, she shouldn't be the one with the last piece. It's not going to work out. But in your head, it's just, we were one piece away and Jess dropped it, when the time when we were 5 pieces away and all of us dropped it, or you dropped it, or I dropped it. We don't think about that one, or don't get as upset or have that in our minds. So yeah, it's definitely unfair, but it makes sense why it's happening. And yeah, they're down bad afterwards for sure. um and yeah, I guess, well, that just takes us right into them back on the beach and them scrambling, which starts with Tiff going off, and you know, she says, you know, afterwards, like, I don't want to say anything because it's gonna, I forget her exact words here at the after the thing. She Jess says she's going to give me a spanking back at camp. Everyone's been yelling at me. And Tiffany says, I have a real attitude right now. Keep my thoughts to myself before I say something that has people looking at me sideways. But I do think we shouldn't have lost that. She goes off and, you know, works through her feelings. They all start to talk. Jess is legitimately in hell at this point. Banu's stressed out. And as those two are both know they're on the bottom, no, you know, Jess is like, it's me. Banu's like, if it's not her, it's me. I'm the only other real option here. And the other three start to have the debate whether it's just good editing and they make us think it, or maybe, or they really were thinking through, there's the three of us. Do we need to look at any of the three of us though as a threat? We get the conversations of like, should we just admit now that it's kind of at tribal too. Should we just admit now and say, fuck it, we're going to lose every time. So like, I want to, which two of us I want to be left with at the end versus the next person out. What did you think about the dynamic and mainly the debate that eventually happens between Q, Tiffany, and Kenzie in different conversations of, this is obviously easy. We kind of know what we're going to do, but also should we, because it's so easy, we have all this extra time to think, are any of us actually the one we should be going for?
Yeah. And I mean, what's really interesting is it comes down to, it's hard to not draw comparisons to Lulu because that's sort of the way this tribe is going. So you've got like Q is Sabaya in this situation where it's like, do I get rid of Kenzie and Kenzie is your Caleb, or because super great with conversations and relationships with everybody in the tribe. Emily is on the outs right now, but Emily is Jess in this situation. How does that all work? And what's the best move? I personally think that, I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but Jess had the best parting shot to Kenzie, that if Q would have had the information here rather than there, and he may have, that it could have gone a different way of just like, she's the same build, they're still losing challenges, except Kenzie is like this person who could have a relationship with a rock and have this like great friendship because she can talk to anyone about anything. And that's only an asset to you long term if she wants to continue working with you. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out long term for Q with Kenzie still in the game, because I almost think, despite the fact that Kenzie is in my draft for our survivor poll, or survivor pool rather, I think that Kenzie's the smarter move right now. It ensures that Tiffany works with Q, because he's like, Tiffany's not going to turn around and necessarily work with Jess or with Banu. Q already has Banu and Jess as he's their number ones. So really, getting rid of Kenzie would actually put him in the prime position in the tribe. Even if they go back to tribal council again, he's sort of sitting in that driver's seat. And it could be a really big missed opportunity to not have gotten rid of Kenzie at this point in the game.
It could be, but the only thing I'll counter with isn't as much like, again, because like I don't think Jess has like been awful at the challenges or anything like that. But from the morale standpoint we were referencing earlier, if she in her exit interviews and everything is talking about how horrible of a time she was having, that like they all know that in that moment, and you probably don't want that around camp. Even one, because if anything, you might feel responsible and be like, well, I feel like a piece of shit if like there's only 6 of us and one of us is like in hell, like having the worst time. There's at least some maybe inside of you of like, that sucks for me, you know. If you're a decent person, maybe that comes up, but otherwise you're just like, hey, this really sucks out here for everyone. And if one person is we're all dragging down, but one person is like the heaviest on the morale anchor here, that like, for the sake of, we don't want to go to every single tribal council. I'm not looking to like, hey, Jess, you're horrible at challenges and Kenzie, you're great at them. But I am looking at like, Kenzie, yeah, she's a threat because everyone likes her and she talks with everyone. But maybe the only time I like kind of smiled today or like had a decent moment on the beach was like when Kenzie and I were shooting the shit about whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, you can like enjoy yourself on Survivor. So I think it is more that than anything, which again can be a very unfair thing towards Jess of like, you know, it sucks that you were having such a bad time, and then because you're having a bad time because of everything else around you, suddenly everything else around you is like, you're having a bad time and we need that out of here. You know, like that's a shitty equation, but I think that's more of the equation than anything here. And I think it's still the second person, and so like, yeah, like she is definitely a threat. In your analogy, it is crazy how much Lulu and Yanu do have in common. And everything you laid out of like the different people kind of playing a similar role or having a similar option available to them here. But I think getting rid of Kenzie would have been a pretty big move to do for the second person out in the game. And I think if anything, Q's maybe thinking, if anything, I can use Kenzie to my advantage of like, if we actually are become a tight 3, and like by the end of this, the 3 of us have sent the other 3 people home, and it's like, hey, like the 3 of us are going into a merge and we're going to be strong, and we each have different assets we can bring to this. And like, Kenzie, don't fuck us over, but you're going to be the one who clearly like infiltrates other people and brings other people into our fold. So he could use it. And to go right into the tribal, as you reference, Jess does have the amazing parting shot of like, I'm going to at least put on notice that everyone here sees you, Kenzie, and sees how much we all like you. We're all having great conversations, and we're all aware that that also means you're the biggest threat when it's not just us and it's everyone again. And so it's at least out there for Q,
Yep.
Tiffany, and Banu of like, Kenzie knows now and knows we all know, but like, we didn't say it. The one we voted out said it, which is maybe the perfect scenario for them.
Totally. And it'll be interesting to see if Yanu does turn around and come right back to tribal council, if they do vote out Banu, or if Tiffany and Q blindside Kenzie at this point. Because it could go one of two ways, right? Like, they could say, Banu's the one we need to get rid of. We're going in with a tight 3. This is what we have to do. We'll duke it out when there's just 3 of us if we come back. And we'll figure out who the 2 of us are going to be. But otherwise, it's a prime opportunity for Kenzie to think that they're taking out Banu and for them to just take that as their opportunity, because they know that if they go to down to 3, come back to Tribal Council with Tiffany, Q, and Banu, and they're probably getting rid of Banu, and then Tiffany and Q are going in as a duo that are getting split into the 2 different tribes. So it'll definitely be interesting to see if Yanu does come back to Tribal Council. And I'm not shocked. I won't be shocked if they do, because their 4 against another 4 still gives them the other tribes the opportunity to pick their best 4. That's the difference. Is like, if you're a tribe of 4, you can only put your 4 people forward, but the other tribes can pick and choose who they actually put into that particular challenge, having at the very least seen it, if not necessarily know how it works.
Yeah. And I mean, Liz didn't even play for Nami this time. So like,
yeah,
they're only,
she did cheer for Nami
though, when they're going to get in there. Yeah. And she did. I did not realize last week her and Mariah have the little moment we didn't touch on, but like meet each other, and they are kind of in that moment, and they kind of frame it to help, but they're not dead ringers for each other. But in that moment, they had their hair like the same. They both had the socks and like the buff in the same place and everything. And they did seem like 2 like sisters sitting over there meeting each other for the first time or something. Yeah. And I think that was what they were trying to get across in the editing of like, these 2 people are very similar and just met each other on the sit out bench. Like, look at this.
Mariah made a Parent Trap reference when she tweeted about it on Wednesday night. But my favorite was somebody tweeted out, what if the 2 women sitting out swapped buffs? Would their tribes actually notice? Would Jeff?
Mariah wouldn't know to talk in the third person, and it would
That's
be
true.
Over very quickly.
She would give the whole game up
quickly over. Yeah. Well, the only other thing, we already kind of got to the Tribal Council, is, Banu gives a great big long monologue, as it seems he tends to do. 2 episodes in, we've got a few of them. And interestingly, the thing Jeff does in this episode, the knife thing, I don't think is like cool. You're not being harder on the players, whatever. I don't know. I do hope you were a little harder on the players. I like that you're, taking that feedback. But the time where I think he is a little more inserts himself in the game more than being hard on someone is he is like, Banu, I'm just going to go ahead and restate what you said. But for the second week in a row, it sounds like you just told the person who's going home that you and everyone else are voting for them, and everyone else is looking at you like, do you have to say it so plainly? Like, what's up with that? Are you down with Jeff? I mean, he's right in that like Banu says it very plainly last week and this week, pretty much very, very plainly what's about to happen. But do you like that Jeff is like, hey, I noticed this and I'm going to re-say that very obvious thing you said and take the temperature of the room on like, so you're just all voting Jess and going to tell her? Do you like him inserting himself in that way?
I do, because of how he did it. If he would have just been like, what's the deal with this? Then I would have been a little bit more uneasy on it. I liked the fact that he said like, look, this is the second time that you've done it. Just want to like make sure like I'm not putting your game on blast. So he wasn't saying I'm putting your game on blast. I'm just going to say what everyone's thinking. He very simply said, you guys have been to Tribal twice. This has come up twice in different ways. You've said that you have an alliance with this person, and this person. That only leaves one other person. So what is she supposed to feel about that? Because it's worth noting, and I'm sure that it wasn't news to anybody else that was sitting there that he was once again excluding that one person. I will be interested to see next week who says it's time to vote, because so far it has not been Jeff. But yeah, Q raised a very valid point in response to it as well, of when you say things like that, like, understandable, it's our tribe and it's very insulated. It's just the people that are here. However, if you then exclude somebody, they feel a certain type of way, they play an idol and they put my name down, then I go home. So that's not cool. And yeah, like I like that he did it. There's not really another way to do it. It was subtle. It wasn't like it's not as invasive as I've seen Jeff be in the past. So I think he's got a good handle on just how far to insert himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked this instant of it, and I think it is one of those things where it's like kind of on a time by time basis of does it work and does he find that balance. And this time I think Banu just made it so obvious, and I appreciated it, and it led to interesting conversation, and it kind of led to a lot of good foreshadowing. And I don't think, and maybe honestly helps Banu, because I don't think Banu realized, and he definitely did by the end of it, after he then scrambles and goes and asks the other three, like, are you voting me out? Who are we voting for? And we get, Tiffany says, like, stop making the block hot. Q's,
which is a great line.
Yeah, just fantastic. I don't know if Banu I don't know. I don't know if Banu would have got it. Very, very different cultural reference there, but maybe he did. Maybe, I think he at least got the idea of like, just yes and shut up and go sit down and vote again, which is basically what Kenzie and Q say too, of just like, yes, just will you just stop talking? Like, stop it. And I don't think he would have realized that his current gameplay was as troublesome for him if it wasn't for Jeff calling him out, and then having that moment where he's then forced to go ask all them, and all of them basically tell him like, hey dude, we still are, but we are not enjoying the experience of how this is going about. So maybe it ultimately helps him. Maybe it dug him. Maybe his grave's already dug if they go back, but it could help him. Jess ultimately goes home, and I think the final thing to quickly touch on is she does play the fake idol, and we didn't even touch on the whole plan to try to help her find the fake idol, which she doesn't. And then Q's just like, screw it, I'll just give it to her. And I believe, as she says in her exit interview with Dalton Ross, that she was confident it was not a real idol, but like, why not hand it to Jeff on the off chance it is? But it was still kind of fun to watch them, and especially to watch Q just be like, fuck it, I'll just give it to her, I'll figure it out. And he, like, you could tell he figures it out what he's gonna do between the time he takes it from Tiffany and Kenzie and finds Jess. Like, he just walks immediately and is like, I have this walk to figure out what I'm gonna say and how I'm gonna do it. And the only thing I wish is Jess does confront him multiple times, is like, is this real? And his answers are not ideal, I think, which is why she knows this isn't real. But if I'm her, if anyone ever hands me a fake idol, if I'm ever on Survivor, I want to remember that this is my thought after thinking of it. The way to know if you're like, I don't know if this is real or not, and I know if I just ask you, you're going to lie to me if it is or whatever, throw that thing in the ocean. Or like way out in the trees. Be like, all right, I don't think it's real, and I'm not going to use it, so I don't think anyone needs it. And just throw it and see what the reaction is. If it's real, they're going to go looking for it. And if it's not, they're not. And if it is real, then maybe you just threw away a real idol that someone gave you. But that's what I would do. That was what I concluded I would do if I thought an idol was fake on Survivor. Just throw it in the ocean.
It was a lot of work just to like offset a 1 in 6 shot of shot.
They're all so worried about the shot in the dark.
Yeah, well, like the funny thing too is apparently, because she said it with when she was talking to Rob in the first tribal council, they tried to get her to play her shot in the dark. So they basically tried to get her to play it, to play it last week so that she couldn't have it this week. And like, they're making it seem like she's a criminal mastermind that they have to like get out with every trick in the book, to the point where it seems like a little bit excessive. And I appreciate the hustle, but like, and I think it was Rob and her who pointed out, it was like, if I didn't find the real idol when it was hidden there, why am I going to find the fake idol that was hidden there? You're the one who found it. You're the one who knows where you found it. Hiding it there again doesn't do me any good.
Yeah. They could have hit it much more openly. I think, it was pretty.
Well, it was like Danny.
Difficult.
When Danny hid the idol that Matt found, he did bury it in roughly the same place, but it was also just like under a tree in roots,
like right next off the path.
Yeah.
not like the rock wall it's in is pretty far off the path and everything. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it was all a little silly, but I certainly enjoyed it. And Jess is gone, and now we'll see before she goes if she gets any hardware. So let's go ahead and hand out some awards from some stacked categories this week. All right, so much more stacked category this week than last week for quote, moment, gameplay, the whole thing. So go ahead and kick us off. I know you got a long list over there. Hit us with your 3 or 4 at most nominees for quote of the episode, or any of them that we haven't heard already.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm actually going to go with Charlie's of were there several reasons you guys voted for him out of all of those little jabs, because that was the best one. It was a slip of the tongue, but I actually really liked the phrase, not the sharpest tool in the shred, because it came from Ben. And I don't mean this as like I'm poking fun at Ben. I actually really liked the phrase, and it fit him as a rocker to say not the sharpest tool in the shred.
That it just came
out.
Yeah.
And it made him even more endearing. I'm liking Ben like more and more each episode. So those, I'll just stick with those 2 for that. Oh, sorry. And in exit interview, right on the way out, I don't even have enough calories to smile.
Yeah, that's really good. I like all of those. I definitely like Liz's many quotes that we read earlier. And then a few that we haven't referenced we referenced the Tiffany at the end that stopped making the block hot. Really enjoyed that. While I know it was mean, as people who listened to our first season of covering Survivor know, I'm into villainry and being mean on this show. And so when Kenzie and Tiffany said you have to be smart to go to clown school, okay, well, this is remedial clown school. I found that very mean, but very, very funny, and a good line. Quick wit from Tiffany. And then though my favorite one, because I'm such a big fan, and I just so this struck me and it kind of came out of nowhere, was Ben after lighting the fire, and he's gets emotional, starts crying, and in his confessional says, "I didn't even cry over meeting Nick Cage." And that's the whole quote. He doesn't expand on when he met Nick Cage or for what reason, but I love Nick Cage. And I just thought that was hilarious that was his reference point of like, I had this other super emotional thing happen in life and I didn't even cry then. And what was that thing? Well, I met Nick Cage once. And it told me a lot about Ben, and I liked it.
Yep.
So that was my favorite quote of the episode, probably.
Fair enough. I think I have to give it to Charlie of were there several reasons you guys voted him for mine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll give it to Ben's Nick Cage then, so that we don't go 2 for 2 on the mean jokes one, because your mean joke was much more deserved and funny to award the quote to. As for favorite moment, we've covered, I think, basically all of mine here. All the are there any that stand out for you that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. My 3 were Mo and Liz interacting.
We need to say again.
Yeah. Yep. Mo and Liz interacting, the Denise and Malcolm moment, of course, and also the Charlie and Ben song off, just like that whole encapsulated event.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, I had the Jelensky jokes, and we obviously covered those in full. I liked the Liz moment followed by Randon's comparison to the billboard. I just thought was so perfect. Like it's hard to get an analogy off on one of these shows that actually like fully explains what the experience has been like for them so far, and while it's also being like funny and interesting. So I really liked that. We had the versus battle. I'm probably gonna give it to Randon and Liz. Just because I'm just fascinated to see where this Liz storyline goes. We didn't even mention earlier, Liz, when she sits out, says the one and only Liz will be sitting out, is how she responds to Jeff, which is just I wrote in my notes, what is with this woman, question mark, after that one, because it just never ends. But
it's true.
Those are the best moments
I give mine to Mo and Liz interacting because I've been waiting for it.
Liz, 2 for 2, dude, pulling off all the best moments of the episode. Look at us. Big fans of Liz over here. Who wouldn't be? Gameplay. Best and worst gameplay. I feel like
Gameplay, keep it short and sweet. Charlie's social gameplay and aligning with Maria. That's what I've got to go on. You can't compare yourself to Denise and Malcolm and then not have me like be completely endeared to you. Definitely just social gameplay as a whole for Charlie, but specifically like aligning himself with Maria and finding that one person.
I'm right with you on that. And I will say, with Maria being my winner pick, I felt really good about it watching this episode, and just like, yes, I like this alliance. I like how you're thinking this through, and just liking everything I'm seeing so far from her. So I'm feeling confident about my winner pick. On the bad strategy side, I had Kenzie in the early in the episode when she goes and has the conversation with Jess and Banu, just of like, it's not a big fault by any means. But I think she was going a little too far beyond like, I need to be good with everyone in my tribe, to you've got this tight three. It's so clearly 3 versus 2. And it's just a little early on day 3 or 4 to be like, well, it's pretty cool. I got this tight three already. What if I tried to finagle my way into having 2 tight threes that I'm the middle person of? And it just felt like a little too much too quickly for me. And so, I wanted to pick something here. And so I'm going with that for strategy I did not agree with.
So I will go with the exact same moment, but I'm going to like expand upon it a bit, because not only did it not get the intended outcome, but on top of that, Jess didn't even buy into it to begin with, because she already saw them as such a tight three that she just assumed that Kenzie was getting them out of camp so that Q and Tiffany could either look for an idol or make some plan or do whatever. So it served absolutely no purpose as far as helping Kenzie's game, especially because she would probably have aligned with Jess before she aligned with Banu out of those two, and Jess went home.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But I will give her this credit. They're on season 6 in a row here of being in Fiji and all being on the same beaches. And she found the like dope camera angles and spots to hang out more quickly and way better than people have before. Cause this multiple times this episode, she's like, let's go over here, gang. And it's like this cutout in the rock wall way out here. And like, look how beautiful this is. And I'm like, I feel like we've been on these same beaches 6 seasons in a row, and I haven't seen 3 people stand in this perfect cutout view before. So she's smart about that for sure. Which leads us to MVP. This is a tough one. I'm completely torn, and I have no idea what I'm about to say. So I'll ask you first in case you have any idea what you want to say for the MVP of the episode.
I'm going to go Charlie. He really came into his own on his tribe. He knows what his weaknesses are, and he found a way to organically work within his own personality and his own abilities to push that forward and to endear himself to the entire tribe. So while endearing himself to 5 other people, he also solidified an alliance with one other person while not tipping off the guys who he's also working with. So I feel like he really navigated this episode incredibly well.
Okay, I like that. And I would say he would be the MVP of Siga, but they weren't on the screen enough, and so I feel like almost obligated again to pick like a Yanu person just because they're on the screen so much more. So I think I'm gonna go with Q. Both, he was a part of the back and forth with Soda, and after all the jokes are being made, he was kind of a focal point of the one trying to get communication better for their team during the challenge a little bit, like took the lead maybe just a little too late from kind of Banu, and then was kind of the focal point of the scramble in how they edited. Whether or not he ever actually was considering anything else, he kind of became the focal point of the person. To your point early on, where they're, as much as they were talking about trying to kind of set up like, here are the underdogs on every tribe, I felt like they were also it was almost more so trying to set up who's the person in the middle as quickly as they could. And they did a great job of framing in this moment, but really probably more moving forward, as Q is kind of the one that's going to maybe have the decision here. So I felt like he got a lot of time, and great, not great acting, to be honest, but the courage to just be like, give me that fake idol. I'm just going to put it in her hand and come up with something was all great. So Q gets mine. Charlie gets Tony's. And with that, we will make a couple predictions before we get out of here. All right. 4 questions. Again, we're not going to do power rankings yet. I think maybe next week, probably after 4 people have gone home, I think would be around when, because we got 18 people start this thing. Like, I'm willing to do 10 people or give you 5 out of 10 to 12 or whatever, but it's hard to pick people right now. We're still so early on, and only one tribe is gone. So we'll get to power rankings down the line. For now, a couple prediction related questions for us to answer, plus our listener submitted question. Which, let's start with this one. Will Banu be a tribal again next week, Tony?
Do you mean?
And by Banu, I mean Vanu.
Yanu? Oh, okay. Yes.
Yanu.
So I think
I can't. They shouldn't have put him on that tribe. They knew they were going to do this to us. It's not fair.
Yeah. No, I had the opportunity to speak to Jess today, and she's absolutely lovely and really hilarious. But the entire time I called her tribe Vanu because they were talking about Eliza on the Exit Press, who was on Vanuatu, and then that got in my head. And it wasn't until well into the conversation, after she had even corrected me, and it didn't click. And then I was like, I apologize. I'm an idiot. But yes, I think that Yanu will end up back at Tribal next week, almost definitively.
I don't think they're going to. I think
who do you think?
I think they're going to avoid it. And I think that Siga is going to go next week, and we're going to get the battle of the sexes, everything Tim's ever wanted at the next tribal council. That's my prediction. Second question, then, because we both clearly think that Nami is going to continue dominating, but as we discussed, they have as big of a rift in their tribe as any. Yeah. Will Venus make the merge as the one person on the winning tribe who has been painted clearly so far as like, they might be winning, but she's on the outs, and there's a big rift here. So will Venus make the merge? Let's make that prediction now.
I hope so. It depends how much Randon trusts her, because I could see, also just very quick side note, Randon's in a much worse position than Tiffany was, finding the idol with the exact same beware, because Tiffany has a strong 3, so she can leave camp and try to figure that out within the time from challenge to tribal. Randon doesn't have that opportunity. He's kind of lower ranking in the game, so he needs to get something going with Venus, and I think if he does, ideally, if he floats that to her, they could make a big move. If they keep winning, obviously, if they have to go to a tribal council, if they don't get out Liz, I feel that it will be Venus.
Okay. Yeah. I think she's going to make it. I feel like they wouldn't set up this much if she didn't find a way. And again, that way could be Nami never going to tribal council, which would be pretty wild. Or we see in the next week on a boat arriving. Episode 3 seems pretty early for them to do a swap. It seems like it's going to be another journey type of situation. But obviously we've seen swaps of some kind fairly often now in these modern seasons in the 40s. So maybe there, as you're saying, setting up these, who's on the outs of every tribe to potentially then swap that person in the future, or have the swaps change something up. But one way or the other, I think she makes it. I don't think they kind of paint her this storyline if it just ends next week or something. The third question,
they shuffled one person too, though, because I remember Carson got flipped to another tribe because they all went to the journey, but they pulled buffs. So
I forgot about that. Yeah, maybe that could happen. That would be good. I liked that version of it versus a just guaranteed swap a bunch of people or
Yeah.
anything. I like that version a lot.
I thought I would hate it, but
although
I
it
actually
does
liked
obviously lead to
Yeah.
it does feel like it could lead to really unfair, but in reality, I think you become the most popular person as often as you become the obvious person to vote out. So we shall
Yeah.
see. But what we might not see is the two people who we alluded to earlier we still haven't seen. Will we get to meet Mariah and Jem next week, do you think?
I hope so, because Mariah is like one of my favorites, and Jem's one of your favorites, but they've had very limited screen time so far.
Yeah, or maybe just the Siga. I mean, we've gotten a lot of time with the Siga Tribe. It's just been very Charlie and Ben dominant. So maybe it will take them losing to get to meet everyone. But it's a little odd that we've had 4 hours, 2 2-hour episodes, and we didn't find the time to more properly meet every single person. But it makes sense. Obviously, their tribe has had the least going on and has never been tribal and everything else. But finally, then.
Kumbaya.
We're only in week 2, and so we only made our winners peak 1 week ago. So I will allow us, if we want, now that we have one more week of evidence, do you, Tony Lance, want to change your winners pick from Tiffany, or are you standing strong with Tiffany? And this will be the last time we are allowed to make the swap until inevitably our people don't win, and then we get to pick someone new when they don't win. But do you want to change, or are you sticking with Tiffany?
Sticking with Tiffany. I thought about it. No matter how you slice several more trips to tribal, I don't see how she's the one that goes, because I figure it'll either be her and Q or her and Kenzie as the last two. I don't foresee it being like Q and Kenzie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she can navigate that fine.
I think your Lulu analogy earlier was spot on as far as the roles people are playing. And I feel like because we didn't get the, like, Jess as the Emily didn't get brought along to then blossom, that it saves the Caleb and Sabaya. If Caleb wouldn't have done that with Emily last time, then I feel like Caleb and Sabaya would have been the two standing from Lulu at the end. And so in this one, I think Q and Tiffany are now kind of going to be the ones standing at the end of this, of everyone still likes us. And if we keep losing, like, it's probably not going to be our fault, because we both seem like pretty well-rounded quality competitors who have done the best. Not that they've been standouts or anyone hasn't been, but you're sticking with Tiffany. I'm sticking with Maria. I'm so confident. I'm so confident in this pick. I would put real money on this. She's clearly amazing at this game, because by all the many evidence we already have. And I don't know, I was, when her and Charlie were walking, I was also like, she's got some tone arms. Like, I feel really good about my, like, Julie from last season, like, maybe the best athlete there is the, like, 50-year-old woman or whatever, like, as far as the endurance and everything goes. And so I was just like, she's making good moves. I'm just getting all the good vibes. So I'm sticking with Maria. You're sticking with Tiffany. And last but not least, our listener submitted question. You've got a question.
Yes,
correct?
We got 2. So,
oh my god,
first one we've spoken about a little bit. So Jen, it was kind of like a combo of Jen and Annie both submitted it. So the strategy with the blocks and trying to hold everything up. What do you feel is the best strategy? I know we've kind of talked about it, where you want your tallest person to be putting the last one in, but you also need the arm reach in order to hold everything up.
Yeah, I think the one person who weirdly actually was doing the thing correctly was Q, for a portion of it, in that it's all pressure. There was a couple different times where Q was holding the first, like, 4 pieces on one side by just pressing on the outside piece of those 4. And I think that who are 2 strongest, like, physically strongest people, both of you doing that on either side. And then the other big thing is not one piece at a time. I think you need to drop the final 2 or even 3 pieces in together. Those ones, it's hard to say how big they were if one person could hold, like,
2,
3 pieces, or 2 even, but maybe even 3, like, across their chest, and, like, lift it up together with pressure on both sides and, like, drop in the final 3 versus the final 1. So clearly I don't have a great strategy. But those are the two things that stood out to me when watching of what Q was doing was working, as far as he was the only person to kind of hold 4 pieces on his own and do it
Yeah,
in a way where he wasn't too taxed or stressed. But then also, I just the whole time was like, I feel like you've got to drop in multiple pieces at a time. This one at a time doesn't seem like the best path.
that, and also putting all your pieces out on the ground in order, because they had their pieces out and they had them so that the letters were facing, but I didn't actually see anybody actually put them out in order so they could just put them up. And I think that was also a huge piece that was missing that could have really helped them. Also, if you wouldn't have
Yeah.
quit
And I felt
in
like
the
they were all
challenge,
worried about the other.
go ahead.
Yeah. I thought Jeff was going to say the word at one point too. He kept saying a bunch of synonyms for persistence, which I found really funny. But also, like, they seemed worried that they were gonna, they do at the beginning, like, that no, talk quiet, like, don't say it loud. And it's
Yeah.
like, you guys are all going to figure out the word pretty quickly. Yeah, as you said, spell the word out right there on the ground, and like, they were allowed to do it right at their feet, right? Couldn't
Yeah.
they have like build this immediately underneath where we're gonna like, and then bend down and just lift it up? And yeah, they were all like, no, go get it, it's over there, that one's over there. It's like, I don't know, maybe there were more rules we didn't know. Okay, good question. What was the second
Yep.
question we had?
The other one was from Brittany. She just wanted our thoughts on a three versus two tribe season. Personally, I would love to go back to a two tribe season. I know why they do a three tribe season is because they specifically don't want anybody to have a place to hide. They want that to be like hit the ground running. It's part of their whole 26 days. I personally think you get better gameplay from a two tribe season, because you don't, like, Jess didn't get really a chance to like blossom into the person that we've seen in Exit Press even. And you've got so many people, if you look back over the new era, that didn't have a place to hide in a three tribe season, but they absolutely would have been a solid force in a two tribe season. I would love to see them go back to two tribes.
I'm kind of with you. Their logic is sound in like,
Yeah.
if this is shorter, we need the game to like matter on day one. And so I agree with that. If the game has to be this length, it's mostly, it's more, there isn't enough people for there to be like a lot of machinations possible when
Right.
there's only 6 and then 5 and 4. But I'm cool with it being 3 tribes if, as we kind of complained about last season, when you do the merge, just let them have a true 12 person, only one of you safe, and maybe one or two of you have an idol, but like a true 12 person tribal council, a true 11 person tribal council, and not do, hey, you're in a group of 12, but actually for this day, you're 6, 2 groups of 6, you're 2 groups of 5 again, because it then, I get, again, they're trying to do it to make the game, speed up the game, but I'm like, there isn't enough options available when it's this small of groups making decisions over and over. There's only like, it's 3 versus 2, it's 2 versus this, whatever, where it's like, when there's 12 people, you need a lot more than 3 to make a decision. And suddenly if you're Jess, you're like, I at least have 5 different people I can try to get to be the first one to move over to my side or whatever. So yes, I long for a larger dynamic of a larger amount of people playing the same tribal council together, but I think that could happen if they just merge and leave it alone and keep the benefit of the 3 tribes at the start.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I will say is I feel that looking at the tribe dynamics as a whole, I think that Jess would have absolutely thrived on Siga, but just by the way that everything fell, she ended up on Yanu, which there are 6 very strong personalities on Yanu, and it just so happened that they didn't all click together in the way that the other 2 tribes did, and as a result, we're kind of seeing it kind of play out. But I think that with what I've seen of her in Exit Press and things like that, I think that if she would have been on Siga, it would have been a whole new ball game. Not that I know who could have gone from Siga to Yanu.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think it's like her, Charlie, Ben, and Mariah. I feel like she gets along great and is able to be herself a little more. But yeah, so that's Survivor 46, episode number 2 in the books. We will be back next week for episode number 3, sometime between Thursday and Tuesday, as always. And the next week on did look pretty good. So I'm very, very excited. And I would say so far, 2 episodes in, I'm really enjoying the season. I think I enjoyed this episode much more even than the first one. So I'm not suddenly thinking this is, on pace to be the greatest season of all time or anything, but I do feel like we're off to a really good start.
Totally. Big personalities all out to play.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. As always, if you want to get in touch, Instagram handles are in the show notes. Find us anywhere that you find people on the internet and send in questions if you have any questions you want answered. But otherwise, thanks for being here. Subscribe over at Challenge Fandom, and we'll be back next week.